So this video is for all of the guitarists who have struggled to build speed and technique on the instrument, because there's a lot of noise online about the best practice methods and the best ways to build speed. And I just wanted to make a video kind of talking about what's worked for me and what I can vouch for. Again, it's not to say what anyone else on the subject hasn't said, but as someone who can play what most would consider pretty fast, I usually max out around 340 beats per minute eighth notes, which is pretty damn quick. I just wanted to share some of the stuff that I've learned about building speed on the guitar and why the two main approaches are both kind of right and both kind of wrong in how I would approach it. So in today's video, we're just going to talk about how I build speed. So the first thing I want to talk about is those two kind of main practice methodologies that I see shifted all the way online. I'm going to give you my kind of take on both of them because, again, I think there's truth to both, but when you should use them varies. And I'm also going to explain some things to keep in mind while doing both of those. So the first and probably oldest one is if you can't play it slow, you can't play it fast. And this one I do generally kind of tend to agree with for the most part. But if you're trying to build speed as quickly as possible and you're really kind of trying to push through a plateau when you're playing, there are some tweaks you need to make to the system. So the general belief that if you can't play it slow, you shouldn't play it fast, I wholeheartedly agree with. A lot of the time, players get kind of anxious to play fast and bump up the metronome, do whatever you're trying to do. And they totally kind of lose the ability to play it cleanly. Like, it just sounds kind of sloppy. And if you're playing with distortion or you're playing really, really fast, you can hide some flubs and you can get away with it. But it's not something that I would generally recommend, just because it's not, if you can't play it cleanly and you can't play it confidently, it's maybe not worth playing in a real musical situation. And so I do wholeheartedly believe in practicing things slow. So for example, if you're doing something like a scale, that's a common goal of my students, is to get them playing scales faster with the metronome. I am a big believer in, if you can't play it, which maybe that's fast for you, I'll slow down a little bit. If you can't play nice clean notes at this speed, I don't want to hear you struggle playing it at this speed. Don't try to fool anyone that you're playing it if that's kind of what it sounds like. Obviously, the more distortion or whatever else you throw on it, the more you can kind of get away with. But I would prioritize having good, clean sounds. And when you are practicing something slowly, one of the biggest things that I see people forgetting to prioritize is playing things with as little tension as possible. Again, one of the biggest things I see in my students is they get anxious to push the metronome higher and higher and higher and higher. And they don't ever get like a sense of kind of mastery over it. And so I always, whenever I'm working with students on building speed, I always make sure that I explain the importance of feeling like you're in control and like you aren't straining yourself. You don't want to be practicing having tension, because tension is slow and fluidity is fast. So the looser your arms and hands can feel and the lighter you can press the strings. And at certain stages, pick the strings. I always say whenever I'm working on something that's really, really fast, I always kind of practice it relatively quietly with my right hand, and then once the speed has kind of come together, that's when I start adding in articulations, or maybe, I want some notes to pop in it. But having everything be as controlled and relaxed and calm as possible is good. You want your hands to feel smooth and fluid. You don't want them to feel tense and stiff. The other thing to keep in mind when playing slow is that while you kind of ratchet it up, you again, I kind of divide between the two schools of thought and tempo. So maybe this is a good time to bring up the second one. But when you're trying to play things at the slow tempo, again, try to really let the sound wash over you, because if it's something that's fast, like obviously before you get that kind of upward sweep, it might be. And so while you're taking the time to be a good guitar student, a good musician, and practice something slow and get it under your fingers, really try to digest what it sounds and feels like to play. And again, try to work on having as smooth and light of hands, both hands, as possible, so that you can really get some of this stuff happening and in your ears, in your brain, and most importantly, in your fingers. Now, the second school of thought that's commonly kind of thrown around is you need to always be playing faster than you're comfortable with, and then you'll clean it up. And now, this school of thought, I have certain questions. This is something that I maybe wouldn't, or I have certain complaints about, not questions. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to a beginner guitarist. I would prioritize good clean reps if I was a beginner guitarist. But if you're kind of intermediate advanced, I think this school of thought has some really strong benefits, but it also has some catches. And so this general approach of just try to do it way faster than you can and then eventually you'll clean up, I think is only good. I call it at real tempos. So to my brain, what I would consider a real tempo is around eighth notes at 180 beats per minute, is when things are getting kind of like objectively fast. You could maybe throw it in around 160, 170, but again, it needs to be actually a relatively brisk tempo for this to happen. And again, the reason that this differs from practicing slow and working your way up, ideally you have practiced whatever you're working on slowly and you're working your way up, you know where all the notes are, you don't want to be thinking about frets and the notes and stuff like that basically by the time you employ this approach of playing faster than what you're capable of. And the trick to kind of getting away with this, and the reason that this way of practicing is also incredibly valuable, is actually the technique of playing fast changes. So if I were to play you, I'll just play you a scale, because that's probably something we're all comfortable with. I'm going to play the A minor scale, and I want you to watch what I'm doing with my right and left hands. In my left hand, look for how much I'm springing off the fretboard, and in my right hand, look at how far my hand is traveling. So when I play it slow, it looks something like this. Now, if I were to play it fast, I would go hit an open string, but again, I'll leave that in. As professional guitarists aren't perfect either. Anyways, the things that you might have noticed are when I played slow, my left hand was flying around a little bit more because I have more time, and my right hand was definitely moving more this way. The mechanics of playing fast, however, require me to keep my hand as close to the strings as possible, like especially if I was doing some say it's a sequence of some kind, if I was going... That was kind of crap, let me do that one more time. I'm doing a lot more kind of close picking, whereas if I did that slow, look at that right hand flowing versus... I have to keep my hands closer. And so the thing about playing fast versus playing slow is that the technique actually fundamentally changes once you start getting into really fast tempos. And that is why I save this for when you get to real tempos. And now, once you start practicing in real tempos, what I would try to do if I was in this situation trying to build speed is I would practice these things at about 5 to 10% faster than you can play. Once you get into genuinely fast tempos, not fast for your current skill level, which again, there's nothing wrong with having to practice scales slow. Everyone who can play scales fast or play solos fast started playing solos slow and struggling as well. So there's no shame attached to this, but just be honest with yourself, because if you aren't, the only person you're cheating is you. But going through those, what I would try to do is I would try to play 5 to 10% faster than I'm comfortable with. So you want, basically, if I was playing along to a metronome and I'm practicing at a real tempo, I want to be practicing slightly faster than is totally comfortable for me. And the way that you find that threshold is that if you start to slip up with the metronome, you want to be able to save it. You want to be able to pull yourself back in so that when you go through all of that stuff, you can actually find yourself able to save it. Because I would think if you go into the gym, you're lifting weights, you have to lift heavier than you're comfortable with to get stronger. But if you lift too heavy, you're going to hurt yourself. And that's kind of how I see the speed thing, is you want it to be fast enough that if you blow a tire, you're not going to crash on your face. You're going to be able to either rescue it or the next rep will be clean. And then once you start noticing that you're able to rise to that occasion, you lift it a little bit. So generally a good rule of thumb is if you were going to do 10 reps of a scale, you want to have it pretty much perfect about 80% of the time is a good way of sussing out this speed. And again, this is what's going to help you kind of push faster in a quicker fashion, because you're stretching yourself more to be able to achieve the goals that you're looking for, rather than if you go through it and, you're just making so many mistakes and you're just practicing the first octave of the scale 25 times. That's not going to get you there. And so this is kind of the fusion of these two approaches, I would say, is how I take, say I have a gig that has some crazy soli on it or something that I need to learn. This is what I do. I practice it slow so that my fingers are 100% confident knowing where it is, and I work the tempo up kind of gradually. And then once I start getting to real tempos, I start making those kind of jumps a little bit bigger. and stressing myself a little bit more and accepting a little bit more sloppiness because I did the work when it was slow and it's in my fingers. I just need to sort out what my body needs to do to get there with the technique. So there's my thoughts on speeding up your guitar playing and how to kind of best approach it so that you're making meaningful progress without, spending years playing things really, really slow. And yeah, that's basically how I would approach it, and that's how I tell all of my students to approach it. So if you found this video useful or enjoyable, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It truly helps me out more than you can know. If you are looking to take a guitar lesson with me, there's a link to get in touch with me down in the description. It's one of the highlights of my life to work with students from all over the world and help you guys get better at the guitar. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to work with you. Link down in the description there. If you're looking to support me and the free educational content that I put out here, you can subscribe to my Patreon page, which is also linked down below. All of my patrons get early access to videos as well as cool behind-the-scenes sneak peeks. It's stuff that I don't really share anywhere else. So I'd love to see you over there. If you're looking for a different way to support me and what I'm up to, there's some ebooks and some video courses that I've made down in the description as well. It's a great way to get some more in-depth educational content from me than I can fit in a 10 to 15 minute YouTube video. And last but not least, I have at least 2 new videos coming out every single week, so I hope I'll see you in the next one. And until I do, I'll wish you a wonderful day, and I hope you have some fun playing the guitar. Thanks.